Hey guys, welcome back. Smash Property Podcast. Today we're going to have a chat about why chasing a cash flow positive property from day one is not going to set you financially free. If you're new, my name's Nick V. I'm the director of the Smash Property Investing Buyers Agency. I've been in the banking game for 15 plus years. I've been a property investor for many of those years, and obviously now helping clients buy investment properties. And we see it quite often. People will come to us and they say, hey, I want to buy a property. It's got to be positive cash flow from day one. And quite often we do turn these people away because it just does not make sense fundamentally in order for you to actually build a scalable property portfolio over time. So we're going to unpack why it's not going to be, I don't believe it's something that you should be chasing from day one, and what you should otherwise be focused on so that you can actually build a scalable portfolio over time to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. Now, like I said, a lot of people come to us and they say, look, I want to buy a positive cash flow property from day one, and I just want to keep rinse and repeating that same process until I am financially free. And the reality is it just does not work that way, because we are going to run into a few issues around lending. Even though the property is going to be positive cash flow from day one, the banks are not going to just go, yeah, cool, let's just keep lending you money and buy these properties over and over again. But I think the fundamental question I always ask is, okay, cool, I can get you a property that, $50, $100 a week, positive cash flow after all the expenses. So mortgage rates, insurance, everything, property manager. But what is that $100 a week going to do for you right now? Probably not a huge amount. And in order for you to get to your, $2,000 a week, i.e. $100,000 a year, how many of those properties are you going to actually need to get it? And when you start working out those numbers, it just doesn't make any sense, and it is not scalable. So the reason why people chase the positive cash flow thing, it's a certain type of investor mindset that comes to us chasing the positive cash flow thing. It doesn't mean to say everyone is like this, but it's like that instant gratification. It's like, I don't want to wait, 5, 10, 15 years to reap the benefits of property. Like, I want it now. And I don't want the property to cost me anything because I'm living my life. Maybe I don't have a big income or whatever. And, it makes sense if the property's paying for itself, then I can just keep doing this over and over again, and I should be able to get to my goal. And it sort of sounds like the right thing to do, and it sounds like a good plan, low risk, low stress, but it just, like I said, there's a few roadblocks we run into: lending, scalability. It just doesn't stack up. So let's dive a bit into about the problem with this particular strategy. If you get some value out of the video, I appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. But the cash flow numbers are tiny. Like I said, I can get you a property that cash flows $50, $100 a week positive net after all the expenses, right? But to replace your income, you're going to need 20, 30 of those properties in order to actually do that. And the banks are not going to keep lending you money so that you can go and buy 20 or 30 of these particular properties if you don't have the income to support it, right? So most of these markets that we buy in, most of the markets that you can buy that have these positive cash flow properties from day one, they often come with very low to no growth whatsoever. And if you don't have growth, you don't have equity, and therefore you don't have any leverage to continue scaling and building a sustainable property portfolio. Now, I might just put a caveat in here that what I'm referring to is buying a standard residential property from day one that is positive cash flow. This is what I'm talking about here. I can and do for particular investors that have the the income and the cash or equity to support building a granny flat on a property, because that will completely take care in most markets of all of the expenses. So you buy a house, you build a granny flat, it's generally going to be positive cash flow depending on your lending situation, depending on your deposit size, etc. But granny flats are a great way to increase and speed up the cash flow situation of a particular property. I'm not talking about those. Because a lot of investors I'm talking about here, they don't have the cash or equity to build a granny flat, right? Because it's 150, 180 grand or whatever. We're not talking about NDIS, co-living. If you've seen any of my stuff, I just do not recommend any of that investment strategy. I think they're all crap. The amount of horror stories I've heard from particularly co-living, it's absolute horseshit. So this is just, buying a property, house, townhouse unit is what we're referring to here. You buy these markets, they just don't grow, right? The golden thing about property is the way that it grows and compounds in value over time. If you're buying in a market that gives you $50 a week positive cash flow, good on you. But where is that property? What is that property doing for you over time? It's likely just soaking up your borrowing capacity, paying you $50, $100 a week. Cool. You're probably going to get one of them, maybe a couple, depending on your income, and not any further than that. The other issue you're going to run into is if you're just relying on this positive cash flow strategy, is you're going to have to constantly come up with cash deposits, most likely to continue buying. And like I said, to buy 20 or 30 of these properties to replace your income, even if the bank was going to lend you money to do it. Let's say hypothetically you had the income to support it. You're going to have to come up with that cash deposit every single time, because the properties that you buy, they're not really going to have much growth in them to be able to fund the purchase of the next property and continue growing, as we do with a lot of the clients that we work with. So the strategy is completely flawed. Now, a lot of people might be like, oh, well, I saw this video from this guy. And I'm like, yeah, when did the video come out? On YouTube 10, 15 years ago? Sure, it probably worked then, but it doesn't work now. The landscape is completely different. And this is why we've got to constantly reassess our strategy about buying. Like I've said to many of the clients that we work with, the strategy I had 5 years ago is completely different to the strategy I have now. Why? Because the property market's different. The lending situation is different. The interest rates are different. My property portfolio is different. My income is different. There's so many things that are going to constantly flex and change over time. And if you're rigid on this one mindset, it's going to be game over, and you're not going to get where it is that you want to go. Now, the reality about financial freedom, it's a loose term that just gets thrown out a lot these days. And I guess it is a good way to kind of summarize what people want. It's ideally replace their income, do more of the things they love to do with the people that they love to do the things with. To get there, it comes with the growth of your property portfolio. It comes with equity, right? The cash flow follows behind it. So we want to just make sure initially, and it might be painful because you might have to sacrifice some things in your lifestyle, but like, hey, nothing good comes without zero sacrifice, right? So we get the equity first, the cash flow follows. Using my specific example of the portfolio that I have personally, I bought a bunch of properties 5 years ago, right? They were all negatively geared, costing me, 10, some of them 15 grand a year out of pocket. I was on a single income, no partner or anything. This was just me at the time. And it was significantly eating into my lifestyle, right? But I sat down with myself, went through a bit of a forecast as to, okay, if the rents kind of keep increasing at the rate that they are increasing at the time of me doing the forecast, and the property prices keep growing at the pace that I'm seeing, okay, by sort of year 5, I actually forecasted by year 7 of holding these properties, they should, in theory, completely take care of themselves. That year 7 turned out to be year 5 of holding the property, that they completely take care of themselves in the sense of the mortgage, property manager, insurance, right? All that stuff, right? It's taking care of itself. And they're growing in value still. So that's why I say focus on getting the equity first, buying in the right market where you've got some good growth. We need to have rental demand, and you hold a property, and then it will, over time, it will then start to cover itself. So it's equity first, cash flow second. You get the equity first, and then the cash flow follows. We can do some other tricky things about putting a secondary dwelling on there to speed up that timeline, but you've got to have the capital to do it. And I guess the balls to kind of do it as well, because you've got construction costs and stuff like that. It's not for everyone, but it is a way that you can speed that timeline up. So growth equals leverage, cash flow equals holding power. You sort of need both working together, not just the one, right? So if we just have cash flow, no growth, like we're going to be, like I mentioned, we're going to be stuck. We're going to have a bottleneck, and most likely, unless, again, we've got the income to support buying, saving the deposits and keep going, it is going to get us stuck. Likewise, too, if you just have a high growth, solely growth focused property without a decent cash flow to support it, again, unless you've got the income to cover the difference, you're going to get stuck at the one property. It is going to cost you a huge amount out of your own pocket to do. And this is why I'm always big on balancing out the portfolio. So I always talk to people about, hey, what does your income look like? What can we afford from a cash flow point of view? For 95% of investors, it is just that balance. It was for me, and still is to this day. I prefer that balance. In balance in terms of growth and having a decent cash flow. Now, the cash flow doesn't mean it's positive. It just means it's decent enough where it's not completely changing my lifestyle for the worse, whilst I wait for the property and the cash flow to come. So the balanced approach is always, in my opinion, the better way to go. Now, importantly, you've got to take what I'm saying here on a podcast with a grain of salt, and whatever else you hear on any other podcasts with a grain of salt, because I'm talking generically, right? Like, I obviously don't know you as the specific investor. Like, if I'm talking to someone as a client, we're going to go into risk appetite and borrowing power and cash flow differences and all that sort of thing. But generally speaking, my recommendation is always going for a balanced portfolio. So positive cash flow from day one does not equal financial freedom. And a lot of people want to chase that sort of quick win and go, hey, I got a property, it's positive cash flow, I just need to do this 10 times, and 10 times $100 a week, there's my $1,000 a week, there's my 50 grand a year, and I'm financially free. It's not 2008 anymore, guys. Like, this is 2025, things are different. So my opinion is, don't chase those kind of quick wins. Property takes time. Good things take time. And you want to be chasing that scalable wealth over time, buying a property at the best price you can possibly get it, having it have a strong cash flow, so you as the investor are not, hemorrhaging, thousands of dollars a week or a month out of pocket. You can then use the growth of that property after 6 to 12 months, extract the equity, go and buy another property, use that as the deposit to go and buy another property. And then you rinse and repeat that over time. You stack, like I was talking to someone just before filming this, like 2 properties. That's it. If you just got 2 properties, nice high growth locations, minimal kind of, inputs from you, cash flow is pretty strong, and you just sat on that. Doesn't matter what age you are, even if you're in your 50s, even if you're in your 60s and you just sat on that for like 5-10 years, you're going to do very well out of that. So think of it from that perspective, and it's not like, we live in this world where we can get everything like the click of our fingers, right? Unfortunately, property is one of those things that just takes time, and we've got to see through that time, and that's where having that balance really is helpful. So if you want help building a strategy for yourself about what is the right property for you, what is the right market, what's the right location, how do you actually stack properties up over time, reach out to us. The contact details are in the description below. It doesn't cost you a cent. You can have a chat with us. If you decide to work with us, cool. If not, that's totally fine. You can keep watching the content that we have here. But it is really important to have that plan before you buy a property, because it takes a lot of time to buy a property. It is obviously very expensive. In my opinion, the first few properties, the first 1 to 4 properties, in my experience, are the critical ones to get right. And if you get those right, the first 1 to 4, you really set yourself up for a huge amount of options later down the line, which are incredible, right? So if you want to get that right, the details are in the description. You can book yourself a call at a time that suits you. But hopefully you got some value out of that. If you did, appreciate it. If you could like the video, consider subscribing. That's all we have time for this week. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, we'll catch you soon.